Okay, regarding the mouse experiment, the mice were the aggressive mice were fighting over space. But were they really? If they were, then they were selfish rather than cooperative. And this was destructive in itself. Destructiveness may be insanity itself. If they were not fighting over space, they were fighting over control. Psychopaths need control. Maybe they have the gene for psychopathy, or some of the psychopathic genes, not just testosterone, but other genes too. Maybe they're XYY mice. Whatever, they were fighting over control, possibly, not just space. They were also probably the same mice who were fighting for the cushy beds. The so-called beautiful people, in my opinion, were traumatized. They weren't going out to grab stuff. They were just traumatized. I think if they'd been removed early enough, they may have been able to recover on their own. To recover on their own and get back to normal life. But if you left them, so having been in there for so long, they were just traumatized, in my opinion. I wonder how they died. I must check out this whole experiment for a lot of different reasons. I think they may have died of old age, because they didn't die of being killed. And it's not recorded that they were stressed because they were looking after themselves. But they may have died a bit younger from stress, but they didn't die from having a low immune system, possibly. I must look that up as well. Their immune system might have been compromised by stress levels. I would be interested to know whether they had stress hormones in their bodies, but they didn't do testing for that in those days, or calming hormones to try and keep them calm, which might be defined as stress hormones since they're a response to stress. They could be psychological equivalent to painkillers, which is calming hormones. They may be producing dopamine or calming hormones or whatever it is. But I think that some people are calling them neats, but neats in real life can be aggressive, but possibly just because they have to. Neats could have been the rejects, in my opinion. The beautiful people could be reclusive people like myself. Then you get aggressors like the policeman Cernigi coming in and telling me I'm a crazy loner who might kill people, and that's why he's dragging me off to a mental hospital. At the mental hospital, the psychiatrists were very concerned that I might be sane, because that would mean, I now think, I didn't know why. Well, I did know why. It meant that they would be insane, because in their opinion, we couldn't both be sane. They're not capable of seeing, and they're not capable of tolerance to the point of accepting different modes of sanity. So let's say, of course there isn't. There's only us. We're the only sane people. There's only one kind of sanity. How can you be sane more than one kind of way? Just goes to show their intolerance and their aggressive attitude. There are lots of different sanities. There's a sanity of a butterfly, the sanity of an amoeba, the sanity of a giraffe, the sanity of a fish. They're all sane, aren't they? And they're not the same mentally. But they're too stupid to notice this or acknowledge it, these people. So when they thought I was sane, they were quite disturbed and worried by it. And in fact, the psychologist McNeilis, or whatever his name was, I think it was McNeilis, said that that meant his family would die. So he said, no, you can't be. They said, no, it can't be. That means my family will die. I think he was thinking of this experiment now, the mouse experiment, Mouse Utopias. The insane ones are said to die. They go insane and die, all of them. But I don't think necessarily insane. I don't think necessarily do go insane. I think some of them are insane, the aggressive ones. I think the rejects are not insane. They're just not. They're just not. They were young males as well. They were just not as aggressive as the aggressors. So they just and they weren't as peaceful as the beautiful people. So and there were not many males in with the beautiful people anyway, the beautiful mice people. So they didn't stand much chance of getting in there anyway. So they were basically just unlucky, really, just less aggressive males who were unlucky. And so it's not necessarily R and K strategies that are the problem. It's aggression. It's literally just aggression. And possibly insanity right from the beginning. Aggression itself may be insanity, really. Although it may be an assistant in the beginning of life, when aggression may push forth survival capabilities. But there comes a point where it's just useless, because otherwise you go down the road of the gorilla. And, you'd rather be using your intelligence rather than be a gorilla. So what you're left with is a bunch of traumatized, peaceful people who look very callous, actually. And in life there are callous people who don't care about others, who will walk past someone who's dying in the street. Even if they're not being attacked, even if they're not afraid of some attacker they think might turn on them if they try and help the hurt person. Even if the hurt person is on their own, they will still walk past them in the street because they're just callous. Maybe the beautiful people were callous. They may have been. If you look at beautiful people in the human world, they're callous, really. They have a lot of money and they don't use it to help the homeless, do they? They talk a lot, but they don't do anything. Or they don't give the money. So then they're not really, they could have been callous, really. They didn't bother to groom each other, for example. They didn't comfort each other. They cared for themselves in a way that was very selfish and callous. They may have been non-aggressive, selfish people. So you have the aggressive people who fight all the time, even when they don't need to, even when they're in a K environment or an L environment or whatever, and have all their provisions, have everything they need. As they say themselves, as rich people say themselves, they don't need to, it's not what they need, it's what they want. They want everything. They say it's like a drug. This is their excuse, I think. They say it's like a drug. The more they have, the more they want. And they must own everything. And then they make up excuses like greed is good or it's a drug. Basically, they're just selfish people with various drives. There are various drives of aggressive people. Competitivity in the intellectual sphere, including the business sphere. People like Molyneux, who keep saying how good peace is, but also that you should look after yourself. That's very callous. He would be a beautiful person, callous, looking after himself. Mice don't have business classes, but humans do. Molyneux is a form of the beautiful people on the spectrum, and on a selfish person, which is on the antisocial spectrum. Selfishness is by definition antisocial because it's by definition confined to your own interests rather than society's interests. So he's antisocial. So Molyneux is antisocial. The police are aggressors because they work for the beautiful people. They work for the selfish people. That's why they defended them even when there was nothing to gain from it, because they had the same genes as them. That's why there was a defender, and even some males defended. They're seen as bisexual for defending males, but they may literally just have had. These mice may know that that they need a little bit of genetic variety. Maybe that's what they smelled on them. Maybe that's what they sensed from them. a little bit of genetic variety that they needed, something that complemented their own genetic defects. Maybe they knew they had A, B, and C genetic defects and saw complementary genes that would help them and their babies in the males that they let in. And other than that, they guarded females for themselves. So they were selfish again. And I bet that's right. And they were selfish again. And as a result, they guarded these so-called beautiful people. But they didn't mate with them just because they couldn't defend that much territory. They were confined by the amount of territory that they could that they could defend. The more territory they tried to defend, the less secure they were. And by definition of not being selfish, they couldn't get together in a bigger group and have more territory and few. You couldn't, by definition, have fewer people. If you're selfish, you want the maximized territory, and you want to be able to defend territory. So you need the maximum people to defend that territory. Otherwise, you have empty territory which will be invaded. So basically, selfishness just doesn't work. By definition, you need to defend the territory, and that is a natural limit to selfishness, because you can't. I need to explain this a bit better, but I can see it works perfectly sensibly. Selfishness, in terms of territory, is its own defeat, and the aggressive ones may have been the same sort of people, but instead of defending a little territory, they're out there trying to get the whole lot. If they manage to get it, it would be interesting to know what would happen with the complete crazies. I suppose they're just complete crazies who would just kill anyway, and they just end up killing anyway for territory, so they just kill each other off, I guess. And so society would actually do best with the non-selfish people who may have been the rejects, the best mothers, or really just basically the rejects and their female equivalents, who or really the society would do best with the non-aggressives and the non-selfish people. And that may be they may be found in the rejects, because the rejects were at least not found in the selfish or aggressive people. So if there's a solution, it's to be found in the rejects, because they're not crazy aggressive and they're not crazy selfish. So, or alternatively, it may be found possibly in the beautiful people, if the beautiful people were genetically isolated and identified, and in a situation where they were in a situation where they were not with aggressive people. The aggressors seem to kill everyone off. Everybody dies with the aggressives at large. So the aggressives, presumably, they didn't even try and hold a little bit of territory and live there. Presumably, with all their aggression, if they'd gotten together cooperatively, they would have been able to hold some territory and bred there. Or even killed off the others and then bred. But they didn't do that. They didn't go and get the beautiful people. The beautiful people, though, were guarded, admittedly, but they didn't all get together and go and pick off the beautiful people one by one. They didn't have any intelligence or plans. Their agenda was just to kill everything, which is what they did, including themselves. With their way, everyone went insane and they died. Everyone died, including the aggressors. So aggression doesn't work in a closed society anyway, which the Earth is ultimately. And this is maybe why the experiments are of interest to these people. I mean, they try them anyway, but I think maybe they are globalists and they do want to rule the world in the way, and they want to know how to survive in it themselves. I don't think they'll be able to, because by definition, they're selfish and greedy. So they're basically going to kill everything, basically, maybe in the entire world. They're killing off the natural world, and at the end of killing off the natural world, they think they're going to survive in their own little way or something. But even with all the resources that they need, they still kill everything off. So even with their own little world they've made, they will still kill everything off because they're just like that. It's what they do. It's like the Bible says, like Jesus called them, lovers of discord. They're just violent. A lot of them do like to fight. Boxers, wrestlers, warriors. They fight to the death sometimes just for fun. Look at the Vikings, the medieval knights who apparently killed each other just for fun sometimes. They would fight to the death just for fun. And look at the people in the Roman arena. Sometimes Caesar would put his thumb down and they would have fought to the death. They would be killed on command of Caesar. So they would, they fight to the death just for fun very often, these people. They may go out conquering. They may have made the colonies just for fun. They said it was because they needed money or something. Could have just been for fun. It's said sometimes there was a population explosion, and that's why they had beggars' banquets to reduce the population of the poor. Could have just been for fun. They said they needed to reduce the population, so they conquered Australia. Could have been just for fun. I mean, look at the trouble they had with Australia. They had plenty of trouble in Australia, didn't they? They killed a lot of natives. Just for fun, maybe. Back in the time of the Black Plague, it was said to be there was a population explosion. And some people think that the authorities spread disease there because people were seen dressed up as what is now called the figure of death, going around making people die. But some people think it could have, the things that were seen as scythes could have been disease disseminators. They were letting mist out, apparently, and the mist could well have been smallpox blankets dipped in water and then sprayed out to reduce the population, maybe just for fun, or maybe as a population reduction measure. But again, we have selfishness and aggression in people. People will mate and produce babies rather than withhold their instincts, instinctive expressions of instincts, and have fewer children. They just won't do that. I've actually asked people why not just not them personally meaning it, but I mean as a social suggestion. Why not just not have sex? And they won't do it. They say no, we won't, as if it's unreasonable. It actually makes perfect sense. But they won't do it. Why? Because they're selfish. They're selfish and aggressive, and they would rather breed up and face unsurvivable trauma. They're not sane. They're not in control of themselves. And, if you tell them this, they just refuse to understand it. I explained my thinking to the psychiatrist, and he diagnosed me in ways I didn't understand. And at a point when he realized I was sane, I think it was not because I was making sense necessarily, or maybe it was because I was making sense and he couldn't bear to think that I was the sane one, not him, and he was going to die. In fact, I was going to die too, but he just doesn't care about that. We're all going to die with these bastards in control. Unless God and Jesus save us. But these people are, he may have seen that I was sane and therefore realised he wasn't. That's because he has, again, this idea that there cannot be different kinds of sanity. Whereas, in fact, we see different kinds of sanity all over the place. We see it in flies. We see it in cats and dogs. They're different, but they're sane. They're all surviving. But he can't see there being more than one sanity. But maybe also, possibly, he saw that I was sane and therefore saw that... therefore thought that... therefore diagnosed me in the way that I wasn't aware of, to be in control of my instincts, which means that so he saw that celibacy basically was a survival tool, and he, being unable to be celibate, saw that if I have a successful survival tool, if there's only one kind of sanity, then his behaviour was not sanity, and was doomed. But and that may be why he said his family were going to die. But it puzzles me again. Why not just accept the celibacy model, at least for a while? Just have one or two kids and then go celibate. But people won't do that. They just won't. There was a commune in France that did that a few hundred years ago. I'm not sure if they were the Cathars. There might have been another people. And they had a couple of kids and then went celibate and became priests. And that seems a lovely way of living to me. But for some reason that was called blasphemy by the Roman Church, and they were killed off in a war. They were literally attacked and killed off. And since then, people have decided that didn't work because they were killed off. But how can it not work spiritually just because it's killed off in the physical world? Jesus was killed in the physical world, but he wasn't killed off spiritually. He even came back to life and said he conquered death. So, what works spiritually and physically are different things. I think spiritually that could be a perfectly good way of living and people should adopt it. Then you can fulfill the Bible as well. You can reproduce as the Bible says. Go forth and reproduce. And at the same time, you can control the population and be priests of God. So you get everything in one lifetime. So I think they were not blasphemous. And the Roman Church called them blasphemous because they weren't like them. And as with the psychiatrist, if you're not like them, they just call you insane and destroy you, or call you blasphemous and destroy you. Whatever, they destroy you because they cannot see anything as being right except themselves. Because they're insane. So I think we're ruled by the insane, basically, and we are, because aggression overcomes us. What we have to do is have perfect love, cast out fear, and even die physically so that we may be saved spiritually. I think perhaps those people who became priests in France after having children are some of the saved. You might say it's blasphemous to have a priest who has sex. Well, not necessarily. You could become a priest after having sex. Or you could say, they're saying, I suppose, that a person with a sexual drive cannot be a priest. You cannot deliberately have sex knowing you plan to be a priest afterwards. Well, you can't necessarily be a perfect priest then, but you can do your best kind of thing. You can be celibate. You can be all the things a priest should be. I think the Jews priests have children. Yes, they do. So God himself never said you had to be celibate to be a priest. And Jesus didn't say you had to be celibate. He might not even have been celibate himself. He didn't say whether he was or not. He may have been, in my opinion, very busy trying to minimize his chances of being killed before he got to preach. So he didn't look like he was setting up any kind of dynasty because he didn't want trouble. And he didn't want to leave behind people that he knew would probably be killed anyway, descendants of his that would probably be killed anyway because he just didn't want to put them through that. And he knew he was going to be saved spiritually anyway, so he didn't need to reproduce. Although he did, therefore, not obey God's command to reproduce. But again, that just goes to show that he was the Son of Man and knew what it was like to be imperfect. He also lost his temper a few times, so he was the Son of Man as well as the Son of God. So he understands us and our human predicament, and he still overcame. So we have had the chance to be saved, at least spiritually, and that's something at least. And we can do. The Bible says to avoid the times of trouble by going into your cloisters or your home or your prayer closets or whatever it is, your prayer closets, I think, and just praying. And that may be what the beautiful people were doing. So it may be what we're supposed to do in the times of trouble at the end of the world. Just try to avoid it and pray. And hopefully we will survive. But even if we don't, and even if we're too traumatized to help ourselves afterwards, at least we will have had less trouble. I do actually think that it's difficult for the rejects as well, because they have a harder time, really. And in fact, I think they could be the non-selfish people. The beautiful people could be the selfish people, and they die in the end as well. But the rejects, who are not selfish and therefore don't belong with the selfish people, and who are not the aggressors, may be the ones who go to heaven, because Jesus says in the Bible that at the end of the world he will come for the one. That means the people who are on their own. He will leave the many to go after the one. And that's what the Bible says. That's the quote. He says, "I will leave the many to go after the one." In other words, if you're in a strong position, you're not going to be his priority. He will go after to help the people who need him the most, like people who are on their own, Christians on their own. So they will be the ones that he will try to save. So they will be among the rejects, even of the churches. They won't even belong to a church. The Bible says to join a church, and churches say you're bad if you're not in a church because you're not obeying the Bible. But even Jesus wasn't perfect. He was the Son of Man as well as the Son of God. He was perfect in being the Son of God, but he knew what it was like to be an imperfect human being. And as he says in the Bible, he will go after the one. That means people who aren't even in a church. So I think the good people are to be found among the rejects. And as Jesus said, he came for the rejects. So at least the rejects will be saved from going to the lake of fire. Or some of them will anyway. Some will be bad anyway, because there seems to be a mixture of good and bad all over the place. And then you have the extremes of selfishness in the beautiful people and the extremes of aggression in the aggressors. But I think the good people will be found among the rejects. And that's my examination of the mouse experiments from the point of view of a Christian. So thank you very much for watching. Bye.